Welcome to the Why Factor, a chance to work out why we do what we do. BBC World Service podcasts are supported by advertising.
Thanks for downloading this edition of the Why Factor from the BBC, a programme that seeks to find out why we do the things we do. I hope you enjoy it.
名牌大学，我3年里是谁浑浑噩噩，自甘堕落。
Chinese pupils are preparing for their final school exam.
我先是，我先是，我先是，我先是。
They're holding a rally. They chant an oath about honour. Their teachers. Their future. They're about to start 9 hours of exams over 2 solid days. They'll come out with a 3-digit score which will determine the rest of their lives. I'm Caroline Bailey, and in today's Why Factor on the BBC World Service, I'm asking why all over the world we take exams so seriously. Let's start with a multiple choice question. Which of these things would you be likely to see outside a Chinese exam hall? A. Silent streets and diverted traffic. B. Drones hovering above looking for signals from radio devices smuggled in by cheaters. Or C. Ambulances on standby. You've guessed it. The answer's all of them. A, B and C.
I feel a bit stressed. I have been preparing Gaokao for 3 years since I entered high school.
I took some supplements to ease my stress.
I want to get a top 800 rank out of 60,000 students.
This is the Chinese Gaokao, the exam pupils take at the end of school to determine which university they'll go to, or if they'll be offered a place at all. More than 9 million students take the Gaokao every year. The higher the score, the better the university they'll attend, and the greater their future earnings potential, and even their marriage prospects.
另外呢，这个学习上啊，虽然他在重点中学学习呢，但是还是
My daughter studies in a prestigious high school in Beijing, and she takes extra classes after school. I believe she will bravely face this challenge. She has been studying for Gaokao for over 10 years, and the victory is ahead. Gaokao is a key point of our lives. I wish my daughter can do her best.
It is possible to retake the exam 1 year later, but if a student continues to fail, there's no safety net or alternative path to university. Suicides are common during the exam season, and the pressure from parents and teachers is immense.
First of all, we have to teach students how to recite. Some subjects require standard answered word by word. Then they have to practice only when they know the principles of how the questions are set. And that's why students have to take so many tests in the senior year. Students recite all of their textbooks and notes. It's hard, and it puts much pressure on them.
I like them once I've done them, and I have a sense that I performed well.
It sounds as if Dr. Heather Ellis from Sheffield University in the UK is rather like me, glad that her exam-taking days are behind her. But she liked them enough to specialise in the history of education, so she's best placed to answer our first question.
Question 1. Explain the origin and development of exams. Please include countries of influence in your answer.
As far as we know, the earliest example of an examination system developed in China in the 7th century AD, and it was designed to assess the relative abilities and merits of candidates for the imperial civil service, which previously had had places allocated on the basis of patronage and connections.
And how influential were these exams?
In terms of subsequent history, they were massively influential. They were the primary example which influenced examination reformers in the UK, France, Germany, and the United States. It's a very long period of time where there seems to be very little development until the very late 18th century. Certainly in the case of Britain, it was only in 1799, 1800 that the University of Oxford and Cambridge looked into a standardised examination at the end of a degree for undergraduates. After that, the same system was then slowly developed for schools, also through Oxford and Cambridge, who would go out to local towns. The first was in 1857, and they would conduct the first standardised so-called public examinations for schoolboys to see whether or not they were fit to enter university.
What about the rest of Europe and the US and other parts of the world? To what extent were they influenced by the British system?
Most parts of the world were influenced quite strongly by developments in Britain. I suppose that the most directly influential network through which those ideas were disseminated were the British imperial networks. Most obviously, the system of examination for the civil service in India was taken over almost wholesale when India gained independence in 1947 and was adapted to local conditions. But if we look at developments in America in the late 19th century, and also in Germany and France at the same time, it is very much the British example they're looking to.
Pupils at this British school are in the middle of their GCSEs. They're the public examinations that pupils in UK schools take at the age of 16 in a wide range of subjects. They're the first really important exams they sit and will give them vital qualifications which allow them to continue on to the next exams, A-levels, 2 years later, or they may take more vocational courses. But GCSE examinations are a rite of passage and the first qualifications they'll keep forever. Jessica, how was your exam this morning?
I found it was actually not too bad. I quite enjoy exams because it kind of has like a goal that you can work towards, and I just like feeling that you've achieved something after a lot of work.
Emma, how are you finding your GCSEs?
I find them stressful because there's a lot of information to take in and I'm not really good at memory or understanding kind of stuff. But I've got through it.
How are your exams going, Toby?
I think they're going all right.
Do you think that they are a fair judge of your ability?
I don't think it's a fair judge, no, because I think there's a lot more to a person than simply what they can memorise before an exam. There's their personality, their work ethic. There's all kinds of stuff that GCSEs don't measure, but I feel like people in the real world do judge you by.
Did you enjoy exams?
Yeah, of course I did. I was an absolute geek at school.
That last voice sounded a bit older than the others.
I'm Mark Lehane and I'm the founder and principal of Bedford Free School.
Mark loves exams so much, he voluntarily did some when he didn't even have to.
I mean, I even did extra GCSEs and A-levels just because I loved the subject. So I totally recognise my confirmation bias.
In that case, he'd better answer the next question.
Question 2. Discuss why so many education systems across the world continue to value success in exams highly.
I think the primary reason why in this country we place so much importance on exams is they're a recognised valuable currency for young people or indeed anyone that takes them, so that when they go about their lives, be it in their working life or elsewhere, they have a common currency that people recognise and that people value to explain what they're capable of doing and maybe the kind of work ethic they've shown in the past.
But there's the flip side to exams, isn't there? What about those who just don't do well at exams?
Well, I think I question the premise of your question. I don't agree with you. I think the vast majority of people have the capacity within them to improve their retrieval of knowledge or to demonstrate their understanding of a topic. Now, for some people it might take more effort, but most people learn in largely the same way. If people work on certain techniques and if they get into good habits of learning, they can all do much better. And, we haven't cracked it at this school by any means. But if you look at some of those outlier schools in this country or elsewhere around the world that seem to be able to get nearly every single child through very rigorous examinations, we've got to ask ourselves, how comes they've managed to do it, and to try and go and learn from them.
I always wonder why some students performing very well or some students don't perform well.
Dr. Chunyin Cheng, Director of Science Education at National Taiwan Normal University.
My son, supposedly, he's the son of a professor, right? He actually does not perform well on the exam. So I always wonder, what are the major factors behind this?
Question 3. Exams are a fair assessment of intelligence. Discuss. Use scientific evidence to back up your answer.
Dr. Chunyin Cheng has been researching whether there might be a gene that makes us perform worse under exam conditions, an area constantly up for debate. After all, how often do you hear people say they're bad at exams? He and his team looked at a gene called COMT. This gene regulates the amount of dopamine in the part of the brain that controls decision-making, planning, and resolves conflicts. We need just the right amount of dopamine for our brains to work at their best. The important thing about the COMT gene is
there are two major genetic variants.
One variant of this gene builds enzymes that slowly remove dopamine, and the other variant builds enzymes that rapidly clear dopamine.
So at that time, we thought that, these genetic variants might have also some influence on students' entrance examination for the senior high school.
Researchers have consistently found that under normal conditions, people with the first variant, the slow mover, have a cognitive advantage and can concentrate better than those with the second, speedier variant. However, Dr. Cheng's team decided to test students with both genetic variants who are taking the Taiwan National High School entrance exam. They were surprised to find they got the opposite results. Those with the slow variant, who they expected to perform better in the exam, under these highly stressful conditions, actually performed worse.
This particular type of students, under normal conditions, they can perform well. However, because the entrance examination, it's very high stake. So this stress actually put this type of student at a disadvantage.
Dr. Cheng thinks the massive surge of dopamine brought on by the stress of exams is too much for people whose brains can only remove dopamine slowly. They get overwhelmed. It's a bit like flooding a car engine. Too much dopamine and it just won't go. Although Dr. Cheng's study was relatively small, only 779 students, the implication is very interesting. It seems to show that however intelligent or knowledgeable you are, your performance under exam conditions may just be a genetic lottery.
Is it the best way? In my opinion, we have to measure whether students retain knowledge and whether they can apply that knowledge in practice. So they have to demonstrate that in some way.
This is Mike Thomas, Vice-Chancellor of the University of Central Lancashire in the UK. He wears two hats. As well as running a large university, he's also a mental health professional and psychologist.
Unseen papers, for me, is just a test of memory. Application in practice, that's a much better way of examining whether somebody has actually learnt and can apply that learning. In modern universities these days, there are a mix of assessments from straight essays to unseen papers, to group work, to application in practice on their own, to application in practice in the work area, to placements. Am I surprised that if I found a course where there were just unseen papers at the end of the year, I would be very surprised.
Question 4. To what extent do exams have a negative impact on your mental health?
We know this. The facts and figures support this. Universities have been quite poor, in my opinion, over the last 25 to 50 years in dealing with this issue. We know that the period leading to assessments and exams is quite stressful and students need a lot of support.
How is that stress manifesting itself?
What we get really is what we call general mental health issues, anxiety, stress and depression, but also behavioural issues, people perhaps drinking too much.
So Do you think exams are bad for people's health? Can we be that blunt?
I would say that they're not helpful for people's health. If you found an individual who thrived on coping with exams, they would be very, very unusual, very interesting, I suppose, for people to look at. But in the main, I think anything from learning to drive and then taking your car test to doing examinations at universities, through going through interviews for a job, always creates some stress. In fact, I would argue without some degree of stress, learning probably wouldn't occur. We have what we call stress cabins dotted around the university where students can drop in to relax and students can chat to mental health advisors or recent graduates. The students absolutely loved last year when we bought puppies on site, and in one of the stress cabins there were puppies that people could sit and stroke them, etc. Many people found it helpful.
Are you surprised by that?
No, I prefer, with my clinical practice hat on, to have an open mind on this. If people are more relaxed, if people are having fun, inevitably that reduces their anxiety. I don't take truck with the idea, that somehow or other having dogs in a room is somehow a laughable event if the benefit is good for those who are in there.
Question 5.
A one-time test score tells you nothing about the capacity to persevere, to innovate. It only says that you test well.
With reference to this statement, explain whether you think exams have any future.
Tony Wagner, expert in residence at Harvard Innovation Lab, believes it's time to rethink exams.
What we're understanding now is that while a certain degree of intelligence is obviously important, what is more important for adult success and well-being is grit, perseverance, self-reliance, self-discipline, the ability to take initiative, the ability to learn through trial and error, the ability to work effectively in a team, empathy. These are all qualities employers are increasingly identifying as critical for success. So today, 15% of Google's new hires don't have a BA degree at all. The word college does not even appear on their job website. The yardsticks we've been using to even determine whether or not a student should go to a university or have a first job are in fact not reliable indicators of effectiveness. I believe that for the first time in human history, the skills you need for work, the skills you need for lifelong learning, and the skills you need for active and informed citizenship in a democracy have converged. They are the same skills, and for the most part, they are neither being taught nor assessed, even in our very best schools.
What's the future of assessment as far as you're concerned? Are we going to move away from traditional exams as we know them?
I think every student should have a digital portfolio that follows them through school and all the way, in fact, to their first job, where they have to regularly present and defend their work, where we see evidence of progress over time in the capacity to produce important work. Beyond that, I think what we're going to do is create a series of merit badges that really show proficiency. I'll give a very specific example.
There's antimony, arsenic, aluminum, selenium, and hydrogen. And
instead of having students memorize, say, the periodic table in chemistry, we all had to learn that.
Europium, zirconium, lutetium, vanadium, and
totally useless waste of time.
Protactinium and indium and gallium, and iodine and thorium and thulium and thallium.
So instead of testing whether or not students have memorized things of that sort in science, we should rather say, all right, here's the real test of your capability to use the scientific method. We want you to develop a hypothesis. We want you to design an experiment to test the hypothesis. We want you to analyze the results, and we want you to present and defend the findings publicly. Now that's an assessment.
And also mendelevium, einsteinium, nobelium, and argon, krypton, neon, radon, xenon, zinc, and rhodium, and chlorine, carbon, cobalt, copper, tungsten, tin, and sodium.
Why should we test anything that a student can look up in a nanosecond on their smartphone? Whether it's a mathematical formula or a memorization of a part of speech or whatever it is, if you can look it up on the cell phone, why test it?
I just don't buy that. You can't Google stuff if you don't understand what it is you're trying to Google. You can't make sense of the research results if you don't already know quite a lot about that topic.
Maybe this is one of those questions where there's simply no right or wrong answer.
I sort of fell in love with the building. What we tend to do is cumulatively move towards the really skillful things, one of which is above your head.
A handmade boat?
Yeah, Canadian canoe. We made that last summer, and then to consecrate it, we went on the Thames.
Graham Whiting is the headmaster of the Acorn School in Gloucestershire, a tiny private school deep in the English countryside. The pupils here study a range of subjects and work on long-term projects, such as the impressive wooden canoe I was admiring. But this is no ordinary school. Parents have to agree not to give their children a smartphone until they're 16 and to limit their access to television and social media. The school offers its own curriculum and doesn't put pupils through the UK's public exams. They do their own testing, but the emphasis here is on projects and long-term assessment. There is a system in the UK, and surely you're better in it than outside it.
Well, we're not actually, because their curriculum, it's a curriculum really for the masses. Here we have our own curriculum. We have subjects here that are not tested in the GCSE and A-level, and actually it's not here about testing in a 2-hour exam. It's to do with the continual assessment, the quality of the work they present, their recall, and the quality of what they've actually understood. So it's a different way of assessing children for higher education.
Oscar is in his final term at the Acorn School, and not sitting public exams hasn't held him back. He made urban planning the subject of his final year project, something most schools don't offer at this level. It's helped him gain a place to study it further at Cardiff University.
I think most universities are very open to the different education style, and they can see by reading up about it or contacting the school that it is perfectly valued as an education system. It's just different.
There's antimony, arsenic, aluminum, selenium, and hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen and rhenium, and nickel, neodymium, neptunium, germanium, and iron, americium, ruthenium.
I'm Caroline Bailey, and you've been listening to The Y Factor. The producers are Lizzie McNeil and Viv Jones. You can hear other Y Factors on topics like why we get intimidated by numbers and why we're getting smarter on the website. And we'd love to hear your views and suggestions on future topics. You can reach us at yfactor@bbc.com. But here's one final thought. What happens if your exams go badly wrong?
Exams are a very safe way to fail, and we sometimes shy away from this in education. I have a number of ex-students who I did everything I possibly could to get them over the line, and they didn't. And yet, for some of them, that was the most powerful lesson they ever had, knowing that when they opened their results, they weren't as good as they could have been, and that was the trigger for them to sort themselves out. And do you know what? Failing an exam or not doing as well in an exam as you otherwise could have done at the age of 16 in a school is a very safe way to screw up, and we mustn't underestimate the power of learning from our mistakes.
Thanks for listening to The Y Factor. If you'd like to hear more episodes, there's a wide range of options on our website. Visit bbcworldservice.com/Y Factor. And other World Service programmes, such as Economic Tectonics, looking at 5 big trends which will impact our future, and More or Less, which looks at numbers in the news, are available to download at www.bbc.com.